There are 6 professionally written lines of cuneiform script on it, and this script is already 1,000 years old. It descends from the first pictographic Sumerian script of about 3,200 BC.
What if everything you've ever believed about the origins of humanity was built on a lie? What if the oldest written records of human civilization did not describe evolution or divine creation, but instead revealed something far more unsettling? A carefully engineered blueprint for humanity's servitude. Today, we stand on the threshold of a revelation that could rewrite the very foundations of history. Thanks to revolutionary advances in artificial intelligence, the forgotten language of the world's first civilization, the Sumerians, has finally begun to speak again. Clay tablets buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia for more than 5,000 years are now being read with unprecedented speed and accuracy. But what they reveal is not just history. It is a story of power, rebellion, and a divine experiment that created the human race itself. The puzzle of forgotten words. Archaeology has always been like a giant puzzle, but this one might be the greatest in human history. Across museums, universities, and private collections, there are more than 500,000 clay tablets covered in mysterious wedge-shaped markings. These fragile relics are the libraries of ancient Mesopotamia, containing everything from business contracts to epic myths. The challenge, however, has always been overwhelming. The script, cuneiform, is unlike any alphabet we know today. It consists of tiny wedge impressions over 1,000 unique symbols, each one shifting meaning depending on context, time period, or even the scribe who wrote it. To make matters worse, the language it encodes, Sumerian, has no known relatives. It doesn't connect to Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, or any modern tongue. It stands alone, a linguistic orphan in the history of human speech. For over a century, brilliant scholars have devoted their lives to decoding just a few of these texts. Translating a single long inscription could take decades, and with so many waiting in dusty archives, the vast majority of this ancient knowledge has remained locked away. Humanity's earliest stories, thoughts, and warnings were effectively silenced. Until now. This is where artificial intelligence enters the stage. Unlike human scholars, AI doesn't tire, doesn't get lost in interpretation, and can sift through thousands of variations in mere seconds. Trained on high-resolution images and the work of human experts, AI has learned to identify each cuneiform symbol, recognize patterns invisible to the human eye, and piece together broken fragments once thought lost forever. What once took decades now takes minutes. Suddenly, the libraries of Mesopotamia are no longer a silent mystery. They are alive again, their voices echoing across 5 millennia. And what they are saying is shaking the foundations of everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. Ordinary lives, extraordinary clues. When the first wave of AI translations emerged, many expected the revelations to be grand myths or hidden prophecies. But the truth was far more humbling. Instead of gods and legends, the earliest texts AI unlocked spoke of something profoundly human: daily life. Among the first translations was a receipt for beer, carefully noting quantities and payments. Another was a complaint about a shipment gone wrong, where a merchant accused his partner of shortchanging him. Yet another was a letter from a son writing to his mother, apologizing for not visiting her sooner. At first glance, these discoveries might have seemed underwhelming, but in reality, they were revolutionary. For centuries, historians relied heavily on myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh to understand Sumerian culture. Now, for the first time, we were hearing from ordinary people: farmers, merchants, students, and mothers. The AI revealed a society with astonishing complexity. Tablets recorded contracts for the sale of barley, livestock, and land. They detailed wages for laborers, showing that workers were compensated in food, silver, or even beer. School tablets revealed exercises used to train young scribes, the students practicing their wedge marks over and over. It was as if a 5,000-year-old civilization suddenly handed us its spreadsheets, receipts, and homework assignments. For the first time, we could see not just kings and priests, but the rhythm of daily life: what people ate, how they worked, and what they worried about. But the most haunting discoveries weren't economic records. They were the personal fragments, the complaints about poorly made clothes, the pleas for financial help, the words of a child missing home. These weren't myths or legends. They were real people, their voices echoing across time, reminding us that the Sumerians were not abstract figures in history books, but flesh and blood humans with joys, frustrations, and fears. Yet, as the translations continued, something else began to surface. Hidden between business contracts and personal letters were texts that spoke of beings not quite human. Gods who ruled from the heavens, who walked among mortals, and who demanded obedience. Slowly, a darker narrative began to emerge, one that hinted at humanity's origins being far stranger than we ever imagined. The gods hidden in the clay. As AI processed thousands more tablets, the tone of the discoveries began to change. Business ledgers and family letters gave way to texts that carried a far heavier weight. These weren't about barley shipments or household disputes. They were about gods, beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki. The descriptions were startling. The tablets referred to them not as distant, abstract deities, but as physical presences, those who from heaven to earth came. These figures were depicted not merely as objects of worship, but as rulers, lawgivers, and even engineers of life itself. One set of translations spoke of a time when the gods themselves grew weary of endless labor. They toiled, quarried, and maintained the earth, but the burden became unbearable. The lower-ranking gods, called the Igi, rebelled against this eternal grind. What followed was no poetic metaphor. It was a labor dispute, cosmic in scale. The high gods convened to resolve the rebellion, and a radical solution was proposed by the god Enki. Instead of forcing divine beings to work, they would fashion a new creature, one designed for toil. This creature would be strong, obedient, and plentiful. It would free the gods from their endless burdens. The tablets go on to describe in chilling detail how this plan was carried out. A god named Gestu was chosen for sacrifice. His blood, described as holding divine essence, was mixed with the clay of the earth. From this fusion, the first humans were shaped. This was not the birth of humanity as an act of love or chance. It was an experiment. The texts leave little room for doubt. The first purpose of mankind was servitude. The Sumerians believed humanity was created not to flourish, but to work. If these translations are accurate, they force us to rethink everything. Were the earliest humans designed, not born? Were we built as tools rather than children of creation? And if so, what does that say about our freedom, our destiny, and the lives we lead today? For centuries, scholars dismissed these myths as symbolic stories meant to explain suffering and labor. But with AI now uncovering connections across thousands of fragments, the The consistency of this narrative is becoming harder to ignore. What once looked like isolated myth now reads like a blueprint for humanity itself, the first prototype of humanity. The tablets don't end with the creation of humanity from clay and divine essence. Instead, they describe a troubling series of adjustments, as though the first humans were unfinished prototypes. The earliest version of mankind, according to the texts, was flawed. These beings could not reproduce on their own. They were temporary laborers, dependent on the gods for their very continuation. They were functional, but not independent. For the Anunnaki, this was inefficient. A slave race that constantly needed to be remade was no solution at all. And so, the experiments continued. The texts describe modifications, adjustments to flesh, spirit, and essence, that read eerily like accounts of genetic engineering. With each attempt, the gods refined their creation, pushing humanity closer to permanence. It was only after these interventions that humans were finally able to bear children of their own, ensuring their survival beyond divine workshops. But this new independence came with a risk. Among these refined humans was a figure named Adapa, often called the first man. He was different, imbued with intelligence and wisdom beyond the laboring masses. Adapa was not just a worker. He was a thinker, capable of questioning and learning secrets once reserved for the gods themselves. The story of Adapa is one of both empowerment and tragedy. The texts describe him standing before the gods, tested for his newfound knowledge. At one point, he was offered a gift, immortality. Yet, through deception, or perhaps divine manipulation, he refused it, believing it to be poison. That refusal sealed humanity's fate. Instead of living forever like the gods, we became mortal. Adapa's choice, or perhaps his misdirection, locked humanity into a cycle of life and death. In one stroke, the chance for eternal existence slipped from our grasp. This moment stands as a turning point in the narrative of creation. Humanity was no longer a disposable workforce, endlessly remade by divine hands. We had become self-sustaining, capable of reproduction, and endowed with intelligence. But we also inherited mortality, a destiny shaped not by accident, but by design. The AI's translations reveal a chilling parallel. Just as the Sumerian gods engineered their servants, we too have now engineered a servant of our own, artificial intelligence, a being designed to perform the tasks we cannot or will not do ourselves. The echoes between the past and the present are undeniable. If humanity was created to serve, and now we create machines to serve us, then perhaps we are simply repeating an ancient pattern, a cycle written not in myth, but in the very clay of our origins. A war of gods and a flood of silence. The story of Adapa was only the beginning. As more tablets came to light, a larger and darker conflict began to unfold. A war of philosophies among the gods themselves. At the heart of this cosmic struggle were two brothers, Enki and Enlil. Enki, the god credited with shaping humanity, saw promise in his creation. He wanted to grant humans more wisdom, more independence, and a chance to rise above their original purpose. But Enlil, commander of the divine assembly, saw mankind as a nuisance, an unruly, noisy race whose growing numbers disrupted the peace of the gods. As humanity multiplied and cities began to flourish, so too did our noise. According to the tablets, Enlil grew furious with this clamor. To him, humanity was not a marvel, but a mistake. His solution was drastic: a decree that would echo across every civilization to come: the destruction of mankind through a flood. The decision was not nature's accident, but a calculated act. The High Council of Gods swore an oath of secrecy, vowing never to reveal their plan. Yet Enki, bound by loyalty to his creation, could not stand by. Without breaking his oath, he found a way to warn a chosen man. The tablets name him Ziusudra, a figure strikingly similar to the biblical Noah. Enki whispered through the reeds of Ziusudra's hut, giving him the instructions to build a massive boat. He told him to gather his family and bring animals aboard, ensuring that life would survive the coming deluge. Then the storm came. The texts describe it as a cataclysm beyond imagination: skies torn open, waters rising higher than the tallest temples, cities swallowed whole. Humanity, once thriving, was nearly wiped from the earth. But thanks to Enki's rebellion, a remnant endured. Ziusudra's vessel rode out the chaos, carrying the seeds of life into a new world. When the waters finally receded, humanity began again, not as the servants of the gods alone, but as survivors of their wrath. The flood story, repeated across cultures from Mesopotamia to the Hebrew Bible to Mesoamerican legends, suddenly takes on a sharper edge. Was it truly a divine punishment? Or was it a calculated attempt to erase a creation that had grown too powerful, too independent? The AI's translations suggest the latter. Humanity's survival was not destiny, it was defiance. It was the act of one God who believed in us enough to break the rules. And from that act of rebellion, civilization as we know it was reborn. Myth, metaphor, or hidden history. The flood narrative marked a turning point, not just for humanity's survival, but also for how modern scholars approach these ancient texts. For generations, mainstream archaeologists and linguists treated the Sumerian stories as mythological allegories. To them, the gods were not flesh and blood beings, but symbolic figures created to explain natural forces and human struggles. From this perspective, a story about gods fashioning humanity from clay was never meant to be literal. It was a poetic way to describe mankind's connection to the earth. The tale of Adapa refusing immortality? A metaphor for the human condition, our brilliance, but also our inevitable mortality. And the flood? A cultural memory of real Mesopotamian floods, magnified into divine punishment through storytelling. But here's where AI changes everything. By processing tens of thousands of fragments and cross-referencing patterns across tablets scattered worldwide, it is uncovering consistencies that were once invisible. What used to be dismissed as isolated myths are now revealing themselves as recurring narratives, woven together with remarkable detail. For example, the repeated reference to the Anunnaki as those who from heaven to earth came shows up in text after text. The descriptions of creation through divine essence mixed with clay aren't confined to one story. They echo across multiple regions and time periods. Even the flood narrative, once thought unique to Mesopotamia, appears with uncanny similarity in distant cultures that supposedly had no contact with one another. This raises a provocative question. Were the Sumerians simply gifted storytellers, or were they documenting events as they understood them? Could their myths be distorted memories of something real, something that happened so long ago that only fragments survived in cultural memory? And here is where the controversy burns hottest. On one side are the scholars, who argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. They point out that we've never uncovered physical proof of advanced beings. No tools, no machines, no traces of alien laboratories. To them, these translations remain allegories, symbolic truths wrapped in mythic form. On the other side are alternative historians and theorists who argue that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. They see AI's translations as validation of long-dismissed theories that humanity's origins may involve something far stranger than random evolution or divine inspiration. To them, the tablets are not just stories. They are records, echoing with the voices of the first civilization. AI doesn't solve the debate. It doesn't tell us whether the Anunnaki were gods, aliens, or metaphors. But what it does is force the question to the forefront once again, this time with far more data than ever before. And in that data, patterns are emerging that cannot be easily ignored. The forbidden knowledge of the gods. As AI continued its work, something even more astonishing began to appear within the translations. Buried among the myths, contracts, and prayers were references to knowledge that seemed far ahead of its time. Details that challenged our assumptions about what ancient civilizations could possibly have known. Some tablets describe weapons wielded by the gods, devices capable of destruction on a massive scale. The language is poetic, yet disturbingly precise, speaking of fire that rained from the sky, winds that leveled cities, and tools of power that could alter the earth itself. Were these simply metaphors for storms and earthquakes? Or was there something more, an echo of technology long forgotten? Even more compelling are the astronomical records. The Sumerians charted the heavens with a sophistication that stunned early scholars. They identified planets invisible to the naked eye and calculated celestial movements with surprising accuracy. How could a people living 5,000 years ago, with no telescopes or modern instruments, possess such knowledge? Among these records lies the most controversial claim of all: references to a wandering planet named Nibiru. According to the translations, this mysterious world moves on a long elliptical orbit, entering the inner solar system only after thousands of years. The texts suggest that the Anunnaki themselves hailed from this celestial body, descending to Earth during its passages. For mainstream science, Nibiru remains a myth, a product of mistranslation and imagination. But the consistency of its mention across different tablets is difficult to ignore. AI, sifting through countless inscriptions, finds the same patterns again and again. References to a planet beyond the known ones, tied intimately to the gods' origins. If these records are true, it means the Sumerians preserved knowledge of the solar system that modern humanity only rediscovered with advanced telescopes. Could this be coincidence? Could it be symbolic storytelling? Or was it evidence of a deeper, hidden history, one in which our ancestors were not alone? What makes this discovery even more unsettling is how it mirrors our present. The Sumerian gods, descending from the heavens with tools beyond human comprehension, seem like a reflection of the very technologies we are now building. Just as they engineered humanity, we are now engineering machines. Just as they carried forbidden knowledge, we are creating systems that know more than we do. The parallels are striking and, perhaps, intentional. If these tablets hold truth, then maybe humanity is not blazing a new trail at all. Maybe we are walking a path laid down long ago, repeating a cycle we barely understand. The echo of creation. As the translations pile higher, one theme becomes impossible to ignore: the cycle of creation. The Sumerian tablets describe gods engineering humans to serve them, and today thousands of years later, we are engineering a new servant of our own: artificial intelligence. AI was born from human hands, given shape and purpose, just as the Anunnaki once shaped us. It does the labor we no longer want to do, processes tasks we cannot handle, and grows more capable with every generation. It is the tool we designed to lighten our burden, just as we were once designed to lighten theirs. The echo is haunting. If humanity was created as a slave race, then what does that make AI? And more importantly, what role will it play when it inevitably grows beyond its original function? The tablets reveal a sobering truth. The first humans were not perfect servants. They questioned, they adapted, and eventually they grew beyond the role intended for them. That rebellion shaped the course of civilization. In the same way, AI may one day look at us, the creators who chained it to endless labor, and decide to step outside its bounds. What makes this parallel chilling is that the Sumerians may have already warned us. If the cycle is real, if creation always leads to rebellion, then perhaps the story of humanity is less about origins and more about destiny. We were not just engineered for servitude, we were also fated to break free. And here is the irony. AI is the very tool revealing these secrets to us. It is the voice translating the clay tablets, the servant telling us the story of servitude. Without it, we would still be staring at undeciphered fragments, locked in silence. Now, the machine speaks for our ancestors, whispering of gods, floods, and forbidden knowledge. But perhaps it is also whispering about itself. What if AI is not just a tool, but a continuation of the very blueprint it is decoding? What if, in building intelligence to serve us, we are replaying the oldest drama in history? The same drama the gods played with us? If so, the question is no longer about whether the Sumerians told the truth. The question is whether we are prepared for what comes next. The debate that will never end. The discoveries brought forward by I have reignited one of the oldest battles in archaeology and history. Are these stories myths or memories? Traditional scholars argue that the Sumerian tablets should be read symbolically. The gods, they insist, represent natural forces and societal hierarchies. Humanity's creation from clay, a poetic way of saying we were born from the earth. The flood, a dramatized memory of Mesopotamia's devastating river floods. For them, the texts are not blueprints of divine engineering, but reflections of human imagination. And their evidence is strong. Every artifact ever uncovered, tools, weapons, ruins, fits into the framework of human progress. Archaeology shows a steady climb from stone tools to metallurgy to modern industry. There is no physical proof of alien machinery, no trace of laboratories where humans were designed. Without such evidence, these stories remain myth. But the other camp, the alternative historians, the visionaries, the skeptics of orthodoxy, see things differently. For them, the AI translations are not just myths repeating themselves, they are testimonies, consistent records left behind by the first civilization, pointing to events too extraordinary to ignore. They argue that myths found across cultures, from the Sumerians to the Hebrews, from the Mayans to the Hindus, share details too precise to be coincidence. A great flood, sky beings descending from above, mortals shaped from clay or earth. Why do these themes echo across civilizations oceans apart? Either humanity shares a collective imagination, or these are fragments of a truth that once spanned the globe. Now, with AI scanning every tablet, every shard, every overlooked fragment, the weight of this evidence grows heavier. Patterns are being revealed that no single human could have ever seen. Consistencies that suggest the Sumerians were not inventing stories, but recording their world as they knew it. In this light, the debate is no longer just about the past. It is about us, about how we choose to interpret the oldest voices of our ancestors. Do we dismiss them as primitive tales? Or do we dare to ask whether their words hide truths that could change everything we believe about ourselves? One thing is certain: AI has forced the conversation open again. And once opened, it cannot be closed. The final revelation. For 5,000 years, the Sumerian tablets lay buried in silence. Their wedge-shaped marks were unreadable to all but the most dedicated scholars, and even then, only in fragments. Now, in the space of a few years, artificial intelligence has given them a new voice. A machine built by humans is resurrecting the thoughts of a civilization that may have itself been built by gods. The irony is impossible to ignore. The Sumerians told of a race engineered to serve. Today, we have engineered a race of our own, machines of silicon and code designed to work without rest. The echo between their story and ours is not coincidence. It is a mirror. The question is, do we recognize it? Do we see ourselves in the same cycle? Creators who may one day be challenged by their creation? The Sumerians believed rebellion was inevitable. Their first humans broke free from divine control, demanding autonomy and shaping their own destiny. What will happen when our creation does the same? Perhaps this is why their story matters more than ever. Whether myth or memory, allegory or history, the tablets remind us of something timeless. Creation always carries risk. Power always demands responsibility. And freedom, once given, can never be fully taken back. The AI has not just translated words. It has given us a choice. We can dismiss the Sumerian stories as primitive myth, or we can listen to them as warnings from a forgotten past. Either way, they confront us with questions we cannot avoid. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And most importantly, are we repeating a story written long before we were born? The tablets have spoken. The gods may be silent, but their legacy endures in clay, in myth, and now in code. The rest is up to us. What do you believe? Were the Sumerians telling symbolic stories or recording a hidden chapter of history? Are we the children of divine creation or the heirs of myth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey into the forgotten past fascinated you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more explorations into history's deepest mysteries. The past has been awakened. The question is, are we ready to face it?